My beloved clergy, it is with paternal and pastoral love that I reach out to you on behalf of the Holy Eparchial Synod to thank you for your tireless efforts serving our people during this ongoing pandemic crisis. We, as the hierarchs of the Archdiocese, are very aware of the many struggles that our clergy are experiencing these days. We have been called to minister during a most extraordinary time in the life of the Church, and the challenges that we face are unique. Among our faithful, we find first responders, medical professionals, and others who continue to face the crisis daily. We find many who have lost friends and loved ones without being able to say goodbye. And we find that many of our brother clergy are dealing with these experiences without fully realizing it. For this reason, we have created a task force to assist you and offer you tools to help you as you respond to the many demands that you are facing. Dear brothers, I keep each of you close to my heart in my prayers day and night. I pray that you will use these videos for your edification and as tools to assist the great number of people that will be calling upon you in the coming weeks and months. May God continue to strengthen and guide each and every one of you at this time and always.
COVID-19 has presented us with a global healthcare crisis unprecedented in this lifetime. You are on the front lines. Your parishioners are coming to you for help. Now more than ever, people are fearful, confused, and stressed from all the ways COVID-19 has affected their lives. In this episode, we will define trauma and PTSD, describe the symptoms, and discuss how you can respond to parishioners who are in distress. Feeling worried, scared, or uncertain is to be expected from time to time, especially during this pandemic. Parishioners are looking to you for help to understand, navigate, and cope with any fear, uncertainty, and confusion they might be experiencing. They might even say that they are traumatized. So what is trauma? And what's the difference between being scared and being traumatized? Trauma is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms someone's capacity to cope, hindering their physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. While you don't have to worry about diagnosing trauma, it is helpful to know how to respond to and guide a parishioner who might be traumatized. Trauma, in fact, is subjective. It's not necessarily the event that makes something traumatic, but how someone experiences and responds to the event. Just like how not everyone finds the same joke funny or tears up at the same sad story. Not everyone who experiences a distressing event will have a trauma response. In other words, not everyone who is trauma exposed will be traumatized. In fact, most people will respond with resilience, and some will even have what's called post-traumatic growth. That means they will learn, adapt, and grow from the experience. People who experience this tend to have more of what are called protective factors, things that help them adapt to difficult situations. Protective factors are things like social support through family and friends, financial stability, a positive yet realistic outlook, and strong faith beliefs. Your presence in the lives of parishioners is a protective factor. It's common that people will come to their priest before even considering a mental health professional when they are distressed. Here's how you can help. Step 1. Reach out. Call your parishioners. Ask how they are feeling. Ask what they need, even if it's difficult for them to answer. Listen for their pain, their fears, and their losses. Pray with them. Pray for them. And teach them to pray. The key here is not to assume what someone is experiencing. As you reach out and listen, keep an eye out for telltale signs of trauma. Did you know that trauma has a biological effect on our brains? Here's what happens. When confronted with danger, the survival part of our brain, our amygdala, overrides the reasoning and thinking part of our brain, or our frontal lobe. When this happens, we go into an alarm state, what's referred to as fight, flight, or freeze. That's a normal process in all of us. When someone has been traumatized, a person gets stuck in this alarm state and can't re-engage the thinking part of their brain. You may see a person experience an extreme adrenaline rush, intense fear, problems thinking clearly or at all. They may seem confused, scared, defeated, or distant. If that person is not offered help and support to assist in coping, the alarm state may persist even when the immediate danger has passed. This is called PTSD. Little things that remind the person of this traumatic event can trigger this fear reaction long after the initial experience. The good news is, recent research suggests post-traumatic stress is not a permanent condition. That means that having PTSD or trauma is not a life sentence. Step 2. Listen for signs and symptoms. So how can we tell if someone has been traumatized? We might notice from how they behave, how they express their emotions, and how they participate in their community. They may display some of these signs or symptoms. 1. Being irritable or angry, like an out-of-control reaction of verbal or physical aggression. 2. Reckless behaviors, such as excessive drinking or impulsive spending. 3. Being easily startled or on edge, which might look like fidgeting or darting eyes. 4. Avoiding people, places, conversations, or situations that serve as reminders of the event. 5. Recurrent and distressing memories, dreams, or flashbacks of the event. 6. Extremely negative view of oneself. 7. Finding it hard to concentrate and having difficulty sleeping. Many people who have clinical trauma or PTSD no longer feel a sense of belonging. They might distance themselves from others, including family, friends, and their community. Some do this because they have difficulty articulating what it is they are feeling, or do not feel understood by others. And some even do this in an attempt to protect their loved ones from seeing their unsightly wounds. Others might become distanced by others, like the wounded man laying on the side of the road before the Good Samaritan met him. How do we attend to someone who has been traumatized? While tending to trauma can seem overwhelming, keep in mind you're not responsible for fixing the symptoms of a psychological disorder. You are responsible for tending to spiritual wounds. Step 3. Integrate into the life of the church. Trauma, or trauma, is a Greek word meaning wound. Of course, there are physical wounds, and we spoke about some psychological wounds, but there's another type of wound that is often overlooked. As Orthodox Christians, we recognize that we must also tend to the spiritual wounds, which ultimately characterize our fallen human nature, which only Christ can restore. The Lord heals the brokenhearted and binds their wounds. Psalms chapter 147, verse 3. But how does he do this? Christ provides us with a clear answer to this question. The Good Samaritan saw a man robbed, stripped, and beaten on the road and moved towards him. When he saw him, he had compassion. He bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. He offered all that he had, carrying him on his animal, and brought him to a place of rest and healing, to the inn, to the church, where he provides both scripture and tradition. And in whose care does he leave us? You, the clergy, are the innkeepers. The Good Samaritan provided the innkeeper with everything necessary to take care of the wounded man until the Good Samaritan comes back. Do what you know how to do. Hear their confession, anoint them, commune them, teach them about the love of Christ in and through the sacramental life of the church, and stay close. This is what they need from you. Step 4. Invite sharing of feelings and needs. When a parishioner shares an event that has been deeply distressing, be curious, not about what it is they've seen, but how it is they're feeling and what it is they need. Rather than asking them questions that prompt a detailed recount of the experience, as we often do inadvertently, invite them to reflect on and share how they're feeling in the present moment. Ask them what they need and listen for their answer. While the act of inviting someone to share their story is significant and healing, it is important for the story of trauma to be shared in the right way, with the right people, such as a mental health professional with experience in trauma work. Retelling the story of a traumatic event to someone who is unprepared to psychologically support the person can actually re-traumatize the person, triggering the same alarm state as if the threat were again present. Step 5. Refer as needed. When you notice signs and symptoms of trauma, it is important to refer the person to a competent mental health professional. This referral does not replace the participation in the life-giving sacraments of the Church. Step 6. Stay involved. Your ongoing pastoral care and prayerful presence is a critical aspect of caring for those who are suffering. Walking closely with those who are suffering enables the Holy Spirit to provide real healing. This is a lifelong journey, but remember, you are not alone.
My name is Dr. Philip Mamalakis, the Assistant Professor of Pastoral Care here at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. And here with me today is Dr. Renos Papadopoulos, the Professor of Analytical Psychology at the University of Essex and the founder and director of the Center for Trauma, Asylum, and Refugees. Time does not allow me to appropriately detail the breadth of his experience and his work, the list of publications, awards, and accomplishments he has compiled over his 40 plus years. Is that right, Renos? I encourage you to visit his website at the University of Essex for this information. We're grateful to have him here today for this topic specifically because he is an Orthodox Christian who has spent his professional career writing on and working around the world with refugees, tortured persons, and other survivors of political violence and disasters as a consultant to the United Nations and other organizations. Thank you, Dr. Papadopoulos, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
The purpose of our segment is to help our clergy understand trauma and assist them in reaching out to any parishioners who are in distress. If I may begin, Dr. Papadopoulos, what is important for pastors to know when they are encountering parishioners who are distressed or maybe traumatized, and maybe from this current pandemic?
Yes. Well, I'm impressed that you have produced a very comprehensive text that outlines a lot of key issues that help people to clarify different ways of understanding trauma. But so I don't think it's useful for me to go through that. That is there. The listeners to this interview will have an opportunity to read that carefully. So what we can do here is just comment on that. So my first response to that is, yes, all parish priests should not be intimidated by the medical and professional terminology, and they should feel empowered and enabled to carry on working and helping and administering to all their parishioners in the usual way. However, so the first thing is not to be intimidated, and I will explain that a little bit more. The second is that, yes, of course, they should be able to differentiate between some serious forms of trauma and some circumstantial responses that all of us have, because this is an unexpected, unpredictable pandemic with all sorts of disastrous consequences that is affecting the whole world. That's why it's a pandemic. So when it comes to the differentiation there, I think again, the priests, the pastors know their parish, and they know how a certain person usually responds to forms of adversity and how it responds here. And the key differentiation is that, is this over excessive, and is this dysfunctional in terms of their own way that they usually perform in their lives, so their parishioners, or in their families, or in worse situations, creating even some destructive patterns.
So if it's excessive or dysfunctional, or the priest starts noticing destructive patterns, or
Yeah.
in their family, for example.
Exactly.
So that would lead us to believe that this is more than circumstantial. This might be more serious.
Yes, 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 yes. So, and then again, the text creates quite a lot of useful differentiations and categorizations that they can refer to that. Yeah. But what I want to move forward is to understand the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation, if we were really to look around us, what has actually happened in our world is that when the pandemic started, did people talk about trauma? No. Everybody was more or less petrified about the actual consequences of that, which is serious, death. There are a lot of deaths. I mean, we usually it's reported in terms of numbers, but actually these are human beings dying, affecting families, etc. So on the one hand, it was serious disaster, which is the ultimate, which is death. And then on the other hand, what we have all been inundated by, amazingly positive responses. I mean, on the internet, there have been so many forms of expressing the opportunities that this pandemic is creating. And I don't know if you have seen it, there is a letter allegedly from coronavirus saying, don't worry, it's me. It's coronavirus talking to you. I've come here to save you. You have been rushing mindless all the time, working, not having time for your children, not having time for nature. Now you can relax and enjoy all of these things, etc. And going into the other extreme, talking about the opportunities, the awareness of new priorities that this pandemic is creating, etc., etc. So what did we have? We have an incredible polarization. And this is what happens in these situations. Either people go for incredible, oh my goodness, that's the end of it. We're all going to get killed. We're all going to go bankrupt. We're all going to sort of kill each other because we're going to be staying together 24 hours a day or whatever. We're all going to be traumatized. Or the completely opposite polarized position, which is this pandemic is actually changing us radically. A lot of people are saying, why do we need to go to offices? We can work so nicely from home, and we have more time for our children and for our gardens and for our wives and for recognizing and giving different priorities to our lives that we neglected all these years. So on the one hand, we see a unique opportunity of some substantial positive transformation, and we should not forget that. And on the other hand, some ultimate trauma and death. So therefore, very simple. Priests, when they're dealing with their parishioners, they should remember both of these opportunities, both of these, consequences, the opportunities as well as the threats. So usually we get paralyzed by the negative, and we get excited about over-idealizing the opportunities. What we need is a stable framework within which we can accommodate both. So when a parishioner starts expressing incredible fears, incredible even panic about some situation, we do need to listen to it. That is important. That is real. But what is also real is something else, opposite. And this is where we need, as carers, as caregivers, as priests, to be able to create a framework for us, if nothing else, to realize and see both. So even that person who is in a panic and lost all sorts of things, that person still continues to be the same good person that was before. So certain good things have not died, have not disappeared. So we're talking therefore instead of looking at people as caricatures of trauma, to see them three-dimensionally, stereoscopically, like human beings. And stereoscopically, three-dimensionally means what? Yes, there are some losses and suffering and disorientation and panic and fear, to whatever degree they may exist in the people that they're telling us about. And we do need to listen to that and do whatever we can in terms of external assistance, as well as in terms of pastoral care and listening and helping them. Recognize that these people have not been deformed completely, but some of their goodness, some of their good relationships at home still continue. In other words, they need to rely on the fact that yes, there is some negative effects, but also some other effects, some other functions and qualities and characteristics of theirs have not changed. We have examples of people in the most horrible situations in war. They still have their own kindness, they have their own gentleness, they have their own goodness, etc., etc. A lot of those are not destroyed by the pandemic. We destroy them by ignoring them and by thinking of the trauma too much. So if we remember that in addition to the trauma or disorientation or suffering or pain, people still retain some of their strengths and something else happens. Yes, all of us are talking about the vicarious trauma, but also there is also vicarious resilience. In other words, by listening to other people's difficulties and seeing how they're dealing with that, we can be inspired about seeing the resilience of human spirit. We can see God's blessings in some situations. And you know, I don't need to tell you as parish priests, you know, that even in the worst difficulties, people do come to some deeper spiritual realizations, and we should not forget that. And that is what we refer to in the business, so to speak, as adversity-activated development. In other words, development that has been activated specifically because people have been exposed to adversity. In other words, because now they have suffered and all of that, now they have become more sensitive about what they have not been doing with their families. For example, spending time with their families, caring. You know, they realize that they neglected their family relationships, or they neglected their praying, or they neglected their, and so all of these positive developments that happen are also consequences and effects of the pandemic. So the effects of the pandemic are not only the negative ones.
So you're suggesting that for the priest to attend at this time, certainly there are some negative things, the fear, the panic. We're not to dismiss those, we're to attend to those, but we can't lose sight that there are things that have not changed. These are still kind people. There's still things to maintain. And actually, it's important to keep in mind that there are what you called adversity-activated development. There are those things that these people will learn now because of the pandemic. So if we want to have a framework for reaching out to people in distress, be careful not to get lost in just the negative and lose sight of the good that's unchanged, but also actually it's important to keep in mind that there are beautiful things that are happening because of that, actually through this challenge. So that's the depth, or the more, it looks almost like in color, you're seeing it, the panic in full color, not just black and white, good and bad, but actually, yes, you know, how this is working. And it seems to imply that God actually works through these things in us to create things, and you use the term resiliency, that actually developing our resiliency, and not just in the people who are suffering, but now for the pastors.
Right.
Which
That's
means I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be afraid. There are scary things, but then to recognize that there's also opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. And this is, but we need to realize that actually as human beings who are logical and all of that, using the Aristotelian logic and all of that, it's very difficult to hold on to opposites. It's very difficult to hold on to opposites. If we see something that is negative, we say, oh, this is all negative. But the important thing for the priest is to hold on to this framework that, yes, we do need to see, attend, validate, respond to the negative, but also not forget that there are some positive effects, and also not forget that a lot of positive characteristics of these people have not changed. And then you have the whole framework. Once we look at that, at the people that we're attending to, then we can use the same framework for ourselves. And that is, for me, the best form of self-care. Because self-care is not to look at myself as a traumatized person and start taking either medication or going to psychotherapists and all of that, but actually looking at myself also in terms of, yes, in this work that I'm doing now with the pandemic, I am petrified, I lose time, etc., all the negative things, my fear and all of that, but also a lot of things of my own good strengths and characteristics and qualities are still there, as well as what am I learning from this? And if we put it like that, and we're aware of these things for ourselves, exactly the same framework that we're using for them, we use for ourselves. For me, that is the best form of self-care. Otherwise, we get overwhelmed by by our own negative responses, or we get too excited and elated by the over-idealization that, no, this is strengthening the faith in people and all of that. Well, it does, but also it creates suffering. And it's important to look at both. Look at both.
So thinking clearly about the effects of stress or this pandemic on us is a critical part of self-care.
Absolutely.
Not denying how we're affected, but also not denying what's remained the change, the good things that have remained unchanged, and also the invitation and the opportunities for developing resilience. Tell us a little bit more about how to do that. Do we need to take time to think about it? What do we do? Because we are going to be negatively affected. It's almost like in order to grow, we have to recognize that, whoa, I have been affected. What are some things a priest can do either to think about these things in a little more nuanced way or to attend to himself? And how does he not bring this stress or just the negative aspects of this ministry back to his family?
Well, the key thing for me, these are absolutely very important questions, Philip. The key thing for me is to keep in mind this three-dimensional perspective. If we're looking at only the negative ones and we forget the existing strengths and we cannot see the strengths that we have already acquired, not developing resilience or anything, but already what we have acquired. The fact that I've seen 3 families this month with coronavirus deaths, what has done to me? I've seen a lot of pain, a lot of response, but also I may have seen some things that I don't notice. The remarkable faith of the one child or one mother or one this or that, and what that has strengthened me more than so many hours of my own prayer.
So not even what I'm going to be learning. What have I already acquired? Yes. Just getting this far from this. Yes. Noticing what has already happened. Not even the hope of developing something new. No. What have I already gained? That's important.
For me, that is more important. Not to be burdened. Everybody is telling us, do this, do that, do the other. I'm saying, look at what already has done in you and validate that and value that and use it. Never mind. Then you can do other things if you want to. But let's start with that. Do we create a perspective to perceive some of the positive exposures that we had experienced, or we have been drowned under the negative and we haven't been able to see that? And so let's sift through and analyze, reflect on our experience and see, and almost sort of mechanistically, if you wish to begin with, put them in three categories. What are the negative ones? What are the existing strengths that I succeeded in maintaining when I have been functioning the last 2 months or whatever? And what have I actually learned, or what have been exposed to, or what has been inspiring for me in what I have experienced in the last 2-3 months in relation to the pandemic? If I ask that question, I will find that. But if I don't
ask the question, I will find it. Because
if I don't ask the question, I will not find it.
If I don't even know to look there, I will never find it. So we're taught, if someone is sad or if they're struggling, you draw close, you talk, you let them talk. And you're suggesting, don't just do that to the challenges. Give that space. Pay attention to what is happening, what has already happened. Because if we don't know enough to look for it, we end up not seeing that. And then we get overwhelmed and sucked into just one part of this reality.
Yes. And this is all of this, this is common sense. This is what people say in terms of putting things in perspective. What is the perspective? This perspective is that, all these things happen, and you put the suffering in the perspective of also the gains, as well as the existing strengths that were already functioning all the time and we didn't notice them.
Do I do this by myself? Do I share it with others? Does it help to share with others?
Right. Now, I can do that. I believe that every priest can do that all by themselves, because every priest is trained for some self-reflection, to look at ourselves. And what is prayer? Prayer is looking at our own soul and exposing that to God. Yes, we should be doing that with ourselves, but there is no harm in doing it with another person. And in fact, we could, I have developed even some kind of
worksheet
sheets that we can distribute to people who want to, if they want to tabulate, to record their own responses according to these three categories, and over a period of time to compare what strengthens their own resolve and their inspirational dimensions, and what weakens it, etc., etc.
So it might help to do it a little mechanically.
Yes.
Just think about that.
Yes.
So
and in different parts of the world, I have different projects that with different variations of how people self-administer that and with others. But some people may want that, but I'm saying that the people can do it on their own or with somebody else. But the key thing for me now is how this can beautifully then connect with our Orthodox faith. Because if we look at only the calamity, the negative things, and so we keep asking from God, give us this, give us this, give us this, help us with this, help us with that. And Schmemann was talking about being doxologically Eucharistic beings. Where is the doxology? Where there is the thank you? The thank you is that actually we still have so many other blessings. We still have so many other strengths despite the difficult times and despite the difficult effects. And also we get even more inspired and more strengthened by some of these difficulties. St. Paul was saying that we have been strengthened by our weaknesses. The whole of our faith is based on that. The idea is not to be all of that, but actually the humble and the meek and the downtrodden is closer, because they open their heart and put things in a wider context. So in the wider context is that within the context of this creation, in this context of us being God's creature, in this context that we believe that God has a plan for us, even with these calamities. St. John Chrysostom says, Δόξα τω Θεώ πάντων ένεκεν. Thank God for everything, not for the good things of what things I think are good for me, but for everything. So if I thank God for everything, if I even thank God for my calamity, that means that I am opening myself up to a different way of looking at myself. And I open myself to a way that I am beyond the usual societal way of looking at my personal profit and personal well-being outside some wider context. And the wider context is my relationship with God, is my openness to receiving and seeing God's blessings even in difficulties, etc., etc. And that I stop, because then it's the parish priest's job, and I'm not a theologian, but they know, and that is what they're doing every day, every Sunday. That's what they're doing. They're helping people to see that. And that is
notice, but you're saying we thank God for the calamity, but not by ignoring the negative or pretending it's not there. But when you have that gratitude it opens you up to the whole landscape of this event. And then when we thank God for the calamity, it opens our minds up and hearts up to encounter the deeper kind of broader opening that can be healing. Not by ignoring the negative, but also not by ignoring the working of God and what's happening.
Right.
Dr. Renos, I could talk to you a long time about this, and we would like to have further conversations. But what I'd like to do now is to thank you for your time, for this introduction to what might be called an Orthodox perspective on trauma and the role of the priest. So thank you very much, and we look forward to further conversations on this topic and further contact with our clergy.
Thank you very much.